I'm going to peel you apart like an onion and saute you with unbridled discipline. By the time I'm done with you, you're going to be a well-oiled vector building machine. How do you like that, designer? Sir, thank you, sir. Welcome to Vector Basic Training. This video is Layers Are Your Friend. Now, I specifically titled that part of the book because I am a dedicated user of layers within Illustrator. And as I defined in the book, you have your primary layers, and then you have your sublayers. I'm a dedicated user of the primary layers. I very rarely, if ever, go into the sublayers, which are like the basement of vector art. It's just minutia, and the way they break up the hierarchy just can kind of get confusing, especially the more complex design, which I'll show you here to kind of demonstrate that. So within the book, actually the history of Bezier curves, I did an illustration of Pierre Bezier. He's the guy who is named, his namesake is for the Bezier curve. So once again, covering the whole process, I drew out my artwork exactly how I wanted to build it. I've worked in this style for other pieces I've done in the past for some of my client work. And so I really wanted to do this one. And as far as I know, I think this is the first vector illustration of Pierre Bezier. So I think that's kind of cool in and of itself. So this is my base drawing. And from that, I created the following piece of artwork. And I've separated this all in layers. You can see all these layers here. You can see how this whole illustration is layered. And I did this to make sense of it. So we're going to start out, we're going to skip these bottom ones right now. And I want to focus on, let's see, let's turn on his jacket and his shirt. So these are all the shapes of his jacket and his shirt. And if I went into the sublayers, just to give you a peek, I mean, we're talking all kinds of minutia in the sublayers, and we don't need to worry about that. We're just sticking with primary layers. Then the tie, so the tie comes afterwards. And this just makes isolating content and working on it, you know, a lot easier when you layer. That's the whole purpose of layering. It's to make access to the art easier, and that's why I do it. Also, if you're going to be sharing your files with other people, nothing is more frustrating to a fellow creative than to receive a poorly organized file. None of your colors have names. You have no layers. You have one layer, everything on it, and they have to get at something way in the back, and it's hard to select, it's hard to isolate it, and it's a pain in the butt to go through all the sublayers and try to find. So just take the time, get in a good creative habit. That's why I named the chapter that. A good creative habit of layering. It's going to make managing your files easier and working on them even easier. So we're going to continue to turn stuff on. So this is the base color for his head. And then these are the blend mode gradients that I use to pull out detail. Now it looks really funky here. He almost looks like Odo from Deep Space Nine, like a shapeshifter or whatever. But if we turn off the color, you can see what all those are about. And if we go into keyline view, all they are is just elliptical shapes with a radiant blend on them, and many of them are set with multiply, so blend modes, and transparencies. So these are all the subtle ways I like to shade in this specific style to pull off content. So we're going to turn those off really quick because I think it's more dramatic when you see them in context. So here's some base shading of the face. And one thing that it's important to know is, yes, I created that original sketch, but it's at this point that I get my base drawing done that I go back and I do this kind of shading. Let's turn off these so you can see it. And I figure out all the shading. So I'm going back and forth, digital to analog, and I figure out my shading once I have my base content created, and then I scan this back in and I build on it to form my shading. Now, the way we're deconstructing right now
isn't really the way I built it. I built the hair all in one, but I'm just kind of clicking up through the layers just to show you the hierarchy of layering and how to organize your file. The next would be the secondary darker shadows, and you're seeing how it's adding more depth and it's bringing the illustration slowly to life, even more shadows. So I'll just toggle on and off just so you can see the progression here. So it's continuing to add depth and richness to the illustration and even darker shadows. So you can see how that's working. Then we'll throw in the lips and the hair and the eyes. That right there adds a lot, and the hair detail really adds a lot of personality to it also. And now if we go back and we turn on these blend modes, well, let's go back and turn on this outline. So this style works good with a nice colored outline, so that's that to define the edge. And then, because he's Pierre Bezier, and it's all about Bezier curves, which he made vector artwork possible in order to make elegant curves for Peugeot motors, he took the algorithm that was created by previous mathematicians and executed it so that it would work more precisely with CAD drawing software. And from that led to our modern day drawing programs, and we're able to draw cool little frilly stuff like this ornament in the background, which is part of one of 600 I created for a book I'm putting out. And I work that into this because it's appropriate, makes for a good background, and using some of the nice Photoshop effects in Illustrator, I put a nice glow to kind of pop them off the background. So that's that. Now let's go back to that blend mode layer where it was just all the radial blends within the ellipse shapes. And now look at it now. It looks good, doesn't look bad, but watch how much it adds by just turning on this layer. So that's how I use those elements in order to form this art. Now keep in mind, if you want to deconstruct this file for yourself, it's on the DVD. You can pull it apart, you can see how I build, and you can kind of understand my mind when it comes to applying layers. Now, in order for this design to be finished, I wanted him to look better lined up with the background. So we're going to turn off all of his elements like that. And I masked him inside of his own shape, so it makes for a nice clean edge here at the bottom. And for secondary graphics, I created almost a logo for Pierre Bezier, once again using some of my ornaments, and I dropped that into the design, and it just felt right if we added an actual element of what a Bezier curve is all about, glorifying the vectors. So this shows you how you can use layering, and layering can be your friend in order to organize your files in such a way that it makes coherent sense to click through and turn on and off layers to access art, to make it easier to navigate, to get around, and to control components and elements within your design or illustration using layers. One thing I should show you before we end this video is let's go to, let's see, yeah, we'll go to the shirt and jacket. And you can just see how extensive sub-layering can get. I mean, it can get really long and drawn out. If you try to dive into sub-layers and really try to comprehend it takes every little element and it forces it to be its own layer. So you don't even have to deal with that. You don't have to manage that. Just stick with primary layers, organize your primary layers well, and you'll never have to jump into your sublayers. You just won't need to do that. It won't be necessary. So I hope this kind of look at layering has helped you. I hope you'll get in the good creative habit of layering and make it easier on those you work with who have to manage your files and utilize your files. But more importantly, it's going to make your life easier. So I know it might be a hassle. You might be used to just working on one layer, but try it. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised with how it assists your creative process. So that's that. Layering can be your friend, and it wants to be your friend. Thanks for watching.